Hello, welcome. Witching Wednesday, episode 4. We are going to be talking today a little bit about relationships that we cultivate in witchcraft with spirit, with divinity, with deity, how we cultivate those relationships, what those might look like. I will obviously offer a little bit of my own personal practice, but I am going to attempt to branch out and include a sampling of a variety of different beliefs and practices. For this in specific community, we don't have one particular set of practices that we all follow because the community out here is pretty diverse and pretty small. So I'm doing my very best as in serving this community to reach people who are pagan practitioners or pagan curious practitioners of a variety of different beliefs. So I will do my best to give an overview of what those kind of look like. And I look forward to taking you on this journey. Hopefully, I don't go too long. It's kind of a big topic. Okay. First and foremost, what is a deity from the concept of a pagan? So I like to think of, I have a very spatial brain. And I like to understand things in pictures, in images, in geometry. So I'm going to start with 1, and I'm going to represent 1 as a circle, right? We imagine this circle. Maybe we'll make it kind of like this. As far as we can tell, our universe is vaguely elliptical shaped at its outermost reaches. That could just be the outermost reaches of what we are able to perceive. However, let's just start with everything, the all that is. We're calling that a vaguely circular / perhaps elliptical shape. We're going to represent that with the number 1. So Hindu belief calls the all Brahma, and it is said to be an intelligent living being in which we all live and have our being. You could perceive that number 1, that the all, as the Godhead or source. You could assign that a particular deity form, and you could extend your worship directly to the all that is. My personal belief is that that would be a bit like a teeny speck on the inside of one of my electrons in my body trying to pray and worship directly to me. That would not be very effective. There is a scaling problem when it comes to size, right? So the smaller that something is, picture you versus a fruit fly, the longer time appears to take. So the lifespan of a fruit fly is very short compared to my lifespan. The consciousness and awareness of a fruit fly is very, very fast and very urgent as compared to my consciousness. And I like to compare that in my understanding of deity. So we can take that number 1, we can call that the all that is. And we can also recognize that we are deeply, deeply within that, very, very much smaller than that. So while entirely possible and acceptable to develop relations and send your prayers up to the all that is, my own personal understanding of that is that that would be a bit you're unlikely to get your prayers and your things that you are attempting to cultivate in your life and according to your lifespan and as they apply to your world by reaching out directly to source, to reaching out directly to everything. That being said, just as within your body you have many trillions of cells and smaller molecules and subunits within that, our universe is arranged in a fractal pattern. So the all that is also has itself smaller, 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 smaller. It's a pattern that repeats throughout the universe. So within every larger number, there are an infinite number of smaller numbers. The infinity stretches up and out and also down and in. So just as we can look to our body and its subdivisions and functional units as a model for how the universe works, we can look without us, we can look within us. It's infinity repeated in each direction. So within that circle are many smaller circles, and within those smaller circles are smaller circles, and within those smaller circles are smaller circles, so on and so on ad infinitum. That's good news for us because we don't have to be a fruit fly praying to a mountain. We can be a fruit fly praying to whatever the closest and most available to a fruit fly. So there is not only the all that is, there is also many smaller, more accessible, more tuned to our lifespan beings and spirits and functional units within that category of the all that is. So we need not approach a skyscraper and have to go all the way to the top. We can approach a receptionist in the lobby. So just as you can take one and you can subdivide it infinitely, you can take this larger number. One of the ones, and I was thinking of this, it is often repeated in spiritual lore is 12, the number 12. So you think of the number 12 and you can think of it as one thing, that 12. You can think of it as 2 6s. You can think of it as 2 5-pointed stars. So you have 5, 5, 1, 2, 12, right? You can think of it as 3s and 4s, right? And for that reason, if you've attended any of my ceremonies, you'll find that I do not always adhere to calling upon the same number. I don't do this to be flippant. I do it to be inclusive. Some people subdivide their circle in 7. Some people subdivide their circle into 6 directions. Some people subdivide their circles into 4s, 3s, 5s, so on and so forth. Neither is more valid or more accurate than any other. It is just different ways of understanding and subdividing the all. When we are creating a circle, we are attempting to recreate connection with the all, to restore our understanding that we are not one versus the many, we are one amongst the all. So that being said, you can approach deity as monotheistic and you only attempt to reach out to the all that is. You can approach deity as duotheistic. That is the tenet of Wiccan beliefs, that there is the god and the goddess. They can be I like to think of the god and the goddess, or the twofold division, as being fundamental forces. And I think that, once again, coming back to Hinduism, that they explain that really well in the Shiva and Shakti current. And I like to think of it as Shiva being electricity and Shakti being magnetism. They are functionally intertwined, right? They cannot be separated. They are individual and they are somewhat different, but they always appear together. You will not find electricity without magnetism, magnetism without electricity. They are one fundamental force. They are two faces of the same force. And so if you were to assign those gendered characteristics, and you have to be pretty loose in your definition of gender at that point. We're not talking about physical manifestation of gender when we're talking about fundamental forces and universal forces, but a twofold definition could be goddess and god, and that would be Shakti and magnetism and Shiva and electricity. And you could think of those as being fundamental forces which move throughout being, all which move throughout all of our beings. So I would come right back to, again, sending your prayers and developing your relationship with electricity and with magnetism is only going to be so helpful and so functional. Obviously, there is electricity and magnetism within everything, right? You could delineate the all that is down to those two fundamental forces. You could pray to those, you could develop a relationship with those. I don't know exactly how effective that would be. I prefer to develop relationships with things that are a little bit closer to me, closer to where I am. But we're coming down from the Godhead, and we're coming down through these layers and coming down through these numbers. So we've gone from 1 to 2. By the time you get to 3, what you have added is relationships and interactions and bonding, right? So what you have is the thing, the other thing, and then the third is the connection that exists between those. 3s are sacred. 3s are sacred to community, right? There are tons of threefold divisions layered all throughout many different faiths and many different practices that people will work with. And these numbers are sacred. These numbers are significant. They represent concepts, right? So coming down to the 3rd, then you have the interaction that exists between them. Then we can look at the way that that is reflected in our bodies. So we have our central channel, our spine, our nervous system, that column that runs up our spine. And you can see this represented in the symbolism that's on all of our ambulances, and is represented in our medical care and has been since the time of the Greeks. It's the rod of Asclepius, which is the central column of our nervous system, and the intertwining snakes that represent the Shiva and Shakti current, the Ida and Pingala, which is the flow of our fundamental forces that runs up our spine. So this symbol is a representation of 3, right? And the healing and harmony that comes from those, the interaction of the 2 fundamental forces as is represented by the number 3. That being said, then we delve into 4. Now we're entering into the realm of the manifest. Now we're entering into the number of, think of 4s as stability. Think of a table standing on 4 legs. Very sturdy, very secure, very stable, very material, very manifest. We don't get to manifest reality until we approach the realm of the 4. So you'll see people in circle honoring that 4-fold division by calling upon the elements as they are manifest in our reality. So we have earth, air, fire, water. That's a 4-fold division. So you could think of each of those elements as manifestations of spirit. You could work with those, and that could be your divine interaction. If we think of all that is as divine, then everything that exists within it, including you, is also divine. So any of the relationships that you develop with the things that are divine, however mundane they might be, whether it be a stone, whether it be a candle flame. I saw something that made me laugh. It said candles are how we keep fires as pets. And I think that's very, very valid. So you can have a relationship with fire, and you can honor that relationship with fire with a candle flame. And then you can move on to a 5-fold division. A 5-fold division is going to honor earth, air, fire, water, and it's also going to honor ether. Ether is said to be the matrix or the substance that carries and holds all of those. So it's a subtle energy and force in which everything is suspended. So I like to think of soup. I tell people all the time, the universe is much more like soup than anyone would like to believe. So when you honor the 5th element of ether or spirit, what you are doing is honoring the broth in which the other 4 elements are suspended, right? So you look at a soup and you could say, yeah, there's carrots, yeah, there's squash, yeah, there's potatoes, whatever you've put in your soup, and those would be the 4 elements. But if you, from your perspective as a carrot in the soup, neglect the fact that there is broth because you're capable of seeing through it, then you are neglecting one of the elements and fundamental forces in existence. So that comes into place in the 5. And there we have the sacred image of the pentagram, which represents a unity of those 5 elements contained within the circle. So it's a physical representation of that relationship and that understanding of our cosmology. So you can move on to 6s. And then for 6s, I'd like you to imagine a spindle, right? So for coming back to that central column, but we're going to imagine the pentagram on a disc, right? A spindle disc with a rod in between. Here, how can I picture this? I don't have a spindle. I haven't created my spindle yet, but it's a bit like this circle, and then we're imagining my pendulum as the rod. So this circle in a 6-fold division represents earth, air, fire, and water as that manifest reality. And I guess I can do it that way. The other 2 directions are above and below, right? And this is going to come a bit back and refer back to the 3-fold division, because within 6, there is also 3. So you have the middle world, the upper world, and the lower world, those 3 things in your 6-fold division, right? So in circle, when we are calling in 6 directions, we are also honoring the 3, and we are also honoring 12. 7 is another way of picturing this, and I like to think of it as combining 3 and 4. And I also like to think of it as an understanding of that thing that I mentioned earlier, where we're infinitely going upward and infinitely going lower. So in a fractal pattern, that circular pattern, it's circles within circles within circles within circles within circles. So when we honor the 7th direction of the within, we honor that just as we look out into the universe and we see infinitely in all directions, if we were to look within ourselves, we would find that same infinity if we go smaller and smaller and smaller within ourselves. So 7 directions would be earth, air, fire, water, above, below, within. I haven't seen anyone go beyond that, beyond 7, when they're calling in circle and they're actively working their magic, actively working their practice, actively doing the work. Although I suppose you could. There's a lot of flexibility in what you choose to do and how you choose to develop these relationships with spirit. In Druidry, primarily, we refer to the 3 directions. So that would be, we would call upon land, sea, and sky. And those are less represented as forces and more represented, it's more similar to Native American shamanism in their beliefs of the upper world, middle world, and lower world is more closely related to the Celtic division of land, sea, and sky. Land, sea, and sky are seen as realms, interlocking circles. So the Vesica Pisces within a circle is a better representation of land, sea, and sky than 3 plates layered upon each other, which would be a better representation perhaps of the upper world, the middle world, and the lower world. And then there's also the addition in Druidry of the 9-fold. So you have the world tree, which connects the 9 different realms, and that's Norse cosmology. All of that, not to be in too much information to reorient you back. What I'm saying is that there are many different options in your path for how you develop relationships with the numinous, with the liminal, with the beyond, right? So there are as many different ways of understanding our cosmology and the world in which we find ourselves as we perceive it beyond what we can sense with our physical senses that we have been granted in these lovely animal bodies that we are inhabiting, in order to see to our physical survival. When you begin to perceive with your spiritual senses, when you begin to understand and receive information with your consciousness, then you are stepping beyond the physical. You are entering the metaphysical. And so when we are attempting to delineate and understand and define how things work in the metaphysical, the thing that I primarily want to communicate is that there is no one way that is correct to understand and to view that. There are as many different perspectives on the beyond as there are beings within it. So don't let someone tell you there's one way to do things and you must do it that way. Please attempt to get as many different perspectives on the beyond as you can, including your own. Once you have gotten your own understanding and relationship with the things beyond, then when you are listening to other people speak about it, which I hope that you do and do often, and then you can gain kind of a wonderful, broader understanding of people, a broader understanding of the universe in which we find ourselves, and maybe the animals and other beings who inhabit this with us. But it should always feel correct to you. You should always check something that somebody is telling you about stuff that nobody can prove against your own perceptions and your own understanding, and reject anything that is disharmonious within your being. Anything that makes you feel afraid, anything that makes you feel small, anything that makes you feel ashamed, anything that makes you feel guilty, is a sign of it not being true for you. And we can respect that some things that are not true for us might be true for other beings, and they can hold those truths within themselves. They can practice in accordance with those truths if it helps them to be of service and to find peace and understanding in their daily lives. Then that's great, but we don't have to subject ourselves to it if it brings us to a disharmonious and unhappy place, right? So all of what's being offered here is endeavoring to give you some material to chew on as you decide where you would like to be and what you believe. And I offer it because it's my passion to be in this rabbit hole and to study and learn from all of these different beliefs. And I am something of a weaver, so I like to collect threads and I like to weave them together. And I like to step back and look at the whole tapestry and say, oh, that's a gold thread. Oh, that's a red thread. Oh, this makes a lovely tapestry when you weave these all together. I like to think that if there was ever a time where we knew the truth about everything, and we had a piece of paper that said, yes, this is how our universe works. This is a guide to the numinous. People fought over it until it was shredded into a million pieces, and everyone took their little pieces home with them, and they taught that, and that was their religion. There's a I was going to read this to you. Hold tight one second, because I do want to read this to you. It's really fabulous story about perspective. Okay, so the Dreams of Gaia Tarot. If you're just learning tarot, I don't recommend this as a learning deck. However, it is wonderful and it is absolutely gorgeous if you already know tarot and you're interested in absorbing an entirely new and entirely different perspective on tarot. It has 81 cards, for instance. It doesn't even have the correct number of cards. It's a totally different approach. That being said, there is a card in here, and it's one of the major arcana, and it is perspective. And she tells the story of the sages and the elephant. And I just think that that's wonderfully relevant to this discussion. Okay. Have you ever heard the story of the 6 blind men and the elephant? They each stand before the elephant. The first man stands at the elephant's head, his hands upon the elephant's trunk. Because of the way the elephant's trunk is shaped and feels moving beneath his hands, he believes that the elephant itself is like a snake. The second man stands at the elephant's tusk. Because of the way its tapered shape and pointed end feels beneath his hands, the second man believes that the elephant is like a spear. The third man stands at the elephant's ear. Because of the way it is shaped and feels flat and waving from side to side, he believes that the elephant is like a fan. The fourth man stands at the elephant's leg. Because of the thickness and strength of the elephant's leg, he believes that the elephant is like a tree. The fifth man stands at the elephant's side, and when he feels the mighty expanse, he believes that the elephant is like a wall. Finally, the sixth man stands at the elephant's tail, and because of the way it feels, he believes that the elephant is like a rope. With 6 totally disparate opinions based upon the information each blind man possessed, the men fall into conflict. Each believes he is right and the others are wrong. The blind men begin to war with each other, so fixated on their own beliefs that they are willing to inflict harm. Suddenly, a sighted man comes upon them and shouts for them to cease. He asks them why they are fighting, and so each of the blind men tells him the tale. The sighted man looks at the elephant and then to the blind men before him. He says, "But you are all right. The elephant's trunk is like a snake. The elephant's tusk is like a spear. The elephant's ear is like a fan. The elephant's leg is like a tree trunk, his side like a wall, and his tail like a rope. But you are also wrong, because each of the parts you have touched are all just parts of the whole elephant." Each of the blind men then circles the elephant, touching the other parts. With the new information, the new and multiple perspectives offered, each is willing to concede that he has been both correct and incorrect at the same time. Their increased perception, born of multiple perspectives, has finally allowed them to see the whole elephant, the big picture. Our perception can shift and alter and be enhanced in a heartbeat once new information born of a different perspective is provided. Once it is altered, it cannot be restored to what it was. Having touched all the parts of the elephant, the blind men could no longer hold fast to their original opinions. Okay, so I think that that's a wonderful story. And every time I hear that story and remind myself of that story, I see it as it plays out in our society, and in our history and in our world, in the fights that we have over religion and religious beliefs. So I hope that we don't mirror that story within ourselves and within this community. And I hope that we can be like the sighted man, and attempt to incorporate new perspectives and understand that whenever there is conflict, there is usually a situation where everyone is right and everyone is wrong. And we need to step back and get a bigger picture. We need to incorporate an additional perspective. When we are experiencing conflict, often the solution is to incorporate a new perspective. So, as with anything that I offer, I am only ever attempting to offer my perspective in the hopes that it enriches and expands your own perspective. It is never offered in a dogmatic fashion. So I hope that all of these tidbits kind of spark your own exploration and help you to learn about different sources of wisdoms and perspectives. And I hope that you can be inspired by me to find a value in all perspectives, because they are all in some way correct and in some way incorrect. So myself included. So please don't put leaders on a pedestal. We are all simply people. So I had a question from Julie, who I'm grateful is joining us earlier, that was talking about when generating content like this for a community, how do I tailor it? How do I know which content to provide? Am I providing based on what I am offering based on what I need or what I think that others need? And so I didn't answer Julie's question, but I will now. I am not offering what I need or what I feel the community needs. I have developed relationships with spirit. And so I am simply receiving and observing and offering what I am instructed to offer. So this sequence I was observing last night is quite interesting because how it has been patterned as I am seeing the pattern develop, though it was not my intention, as I am merely a vessel and I am merely speaking, I'm allowing spirit to speak through me and speak for me. I am a person with my own bias and my own lens and my perspective. I'm not a completely clear source, although I do endeavor to be. I do my best. But I have developed relationships with spirit. I have deep and meaningful connections to the numinous and to the beyond as I perceive it and as I understand it. And I myself am a very nervous and shy person. I don't really love being in front of people. And I have been elbowed to work on that because I am meant to utilize my relationship with spirit in order to be that voice and hold that space and offer that perspective and share that with the world. So I like how what we have done and what we have been doing, though it was not my conscious intent, is we've done a bit of thaumaturgy, theurgy, and what that means is that we've gone a bit into the material aspects of practice as we started with working with altars. And then we moved on to the relationship with spirit as we were talking about walking a sovereign path and choosing your own path and shedding the dogma of others. And we've touched back on that today, but the next one we talked about tools and materials that correlates with the altar, and it's also physical and material. And then we're coming back to theurgy again today. So those are the two foundational tenets of any kind of magical practice, is that you have both the physical elements of your practice and the things that you do, and you have the spiritual element of your practices and the what you believe. And so speaking today on what we believe has been largely another way to look at things beyond spatially and geometry wise and looking into numbers is to look at things like music. Just as music has numbers, it has a time signature. It also has a vibrational pattern, right? It has a wave pattern. So, do we look at light as it is as a particle, or do we look at light as it is as a waveform? Right? Those are just two different aspects of the same thing. So we're getting into that with magical practice. So I think people often perceive magical practice as being unscientific, as being woo-woo, and I would say that that's patently false. There is deeply the deeper that you dive into science, you'll come out the other side with a stronger faith in the spiritual, which is something that people who have a shallow understanding of science that they gained from school will typically not understand, but people who are like theoretical physicists and who are actually practicing science will often affirm that the deeper that you peer into our universe, what you will discover is that it is peering back at us. So the science, if you're looking at photons of light, is that they can either be found in a particle form or they can be found in a wave form. And that's a good kind of metaphor for understanding thaumaturgy versus theurgy. So thaumaturgy would be your particle form, the light having taken on a fixed persona, and theurgy would be the potential that exists in that photon, right? So the entirety of that waveform, right? The entirety of what it can be, the entirety of its possibility, of its potential. If you look at an electron, it is either fixed and you can view it, or it is in a state of possibility that hasn't been isolated out of the field. So when we are working with the numinous and we are working with the spiritual, and we are developing those relationships and we are exploring what do we believe and who do we reach out to, we're actually using it's two different things. So you have to step out of a fixed mindset and concrete material reality in order to enter the realm of possibility, the realm of the spiritual, the realm of the numinous, the realm of the waveform. So coming back to that waveform, what has a waveform? Music has a waveform, right? And so if we think that each individual thing that we can see or perceive has a corresponding pattern, has a corresponding waveform, has a corresponding vibration, then we can see things either as they are materially or as they are vibrationally. And so those are just different ways of looking at and approaching the same thing. And so understanding that both are inherent in everything allows you, it opens the doors of possibility, right? So you can look at a stone and you can understand, yes, this is a stone. It has a material reality. It can be described in sense terms. But this stone also has a vibration, and it also has a spiritual reality, and it also contains information, which cannot be destroyed, cannot be lost. Like the information that is evident in everything remains, even when it's spaghettified in a black hole, right? So when we are perceiving things and we are utilizing our perceptions, it can help us to gain a broader understanding of what we are looking at, to be able to peer beyond the surface, right? To be able to look beyond the physical and to see the spiritual side of things. So it can be helpful when you are expanding your perception and you are talking with people to classify things. Like, are we talking about things that are physically manifest? Are we talking about things that are concrete? Or are we talking about things that are spiritually unmanifest? Are we talking about things that have patterns of vibration, that have movement, right? Which lens are we perceiving this conversation and the world through? So different ways that people perceive vibrationally that realm of possibility, and that the numinous is that part of what flows beyond what we can see and what's physically manifest is kind of, I mean, I like to think of it as the realm of infinite possibility, or kind of stepping through the looking glass and entering Wonderland, in that anything is possible there. And I mean that quite literally. Anything is possible there. So people will attempt to confine the infinite into something that is more palatable and something that is more comprehensible. And I personally see that as a mistake. I don't think that making infinite possibility into something finite is necessary. There are plenty of finite things that we can already look at. And so the point of the infinite is to conceive of new possibilities, because it is only once we can conceive of the new possibility that we can convert that into a functional finite aspect of our reality. So if you constantly do the same thing, you will constantly get the same results. So the ability to have like neuroplasticity and to develop new things and to learn new behaviors is fundamentally a piece of being able to conceive of infinite possibility. You have to imagine something before you can experience it. And we are limited in what we are able to experience only by what we are able to imagine for ourselves. So to be clear, we're jumping into the world of the imaginary. Not that that makes it any less real. right? It just means that it is unmanifest. It's not impossible, it's just unmanifest. And that's a very important difference. Anything that can be manifest was at one point in time unmanifest, including every aspect of our reality at one point in time was unmanifest. It existed in the realm of possibility. So when you enter the realm of possibility, you don't have to go without a map or without any understanding, because you're not the first person to ever enter the realm of the unmanifest. Many, many people do. Few of them can talk openly about it because of conditions of our history, right? There's a lot of persecution inherent in our past and in our society towards those of us who are able to enter the realm of the unmanifest, who do travel into the realm of spirit and who do develop relationships with spirit. It's very threatening to the concrete hierarchy to have people who are able to imagine something different. So, if it is helpful to conceive of this realm of infinite possibility along some well-trodden paths, there are an abundance of well-trodden paths. My personal map to the realm of infinite possibility is a tree. So I was drawn to Druidic practice and to that particular delineation of my own personal spiritual faith, because my own personal relationship with spirit is through the world tree. So, I mean, we can talk about, the possibility that we all come in here with some inlaid patterns and paths that we've carried with us from our previous lives. There are so many different ways that you can look at why that is, but it was a facet of my experience that when I was a teen and first starting to practice astral traveling and first trying to harness that, I did lucid dreaming as from a child. I don't remember ever not having those sort of abilities. And it's the reason that drew me to this particular practice. And it's what has me sitting here being the one trying to share this with you and kind of cue it into you, is that what's unusual about me is that I've always had psychic abilities. It made me very unusual as a kid. It did not make me popular, I'll tell you that very much. And it did set me on a path of trying to find a spirituality that acknowledged my existence without persecuting me for existing. So, being able to sense the beyond, being able to communicate with the beyond, I think it's a skill that anyone can cultivate. But I think that just like not everyone who works out regularly is going to become an Olympic athlete, there are certain of us who are predisposed towards these abilities. There are those of us who have more sensitive sense perceptions, and some of us with more sensitive sense perceptions are actually receiving and perceiving the realm of the numinous, in addition to the realm of the physical that corresponds with it. So, all of our bodies emit light. So a function of human beings is that we are physically emitting light on the infrared spectrum. So when people talk about being love and light and shining your light and all that other, it's not just frilly, it's actually also fact. It's actually true. But not everyone emits the same amount of light. Not everyone is as bright. And there are people who are receiving that information. Do we have the science that backs up how we are receiving that information? Not yet, but I think we will someday. It's my personal belief that we have sense perception in our bones, in the crystalline structure, the quartz crystalline structure in our bones. Quartz is such an amazing mineral. It's the most abundant mineral on Earth. Quartz has the ability to, it has piezoelectric properties. So if you apply a mechanical stress to quartz, it emits an electrical force. So it turns mechanical energy into electrical energy, and vice versa, which is really, really interesting. But there's a lot of quartz in our bones. And we have this thing that we say, and it's because it's a knowing that we have. I feel it in my bones. There are those of us who are capable of receiving and perceiving things in our bones. That's my It's my understanding is that that's the sensory organ that is being used to receive this vibrational information, or this vehicle for traversing the numinous and entering that other realm where there's wave particle, where there's possibility. So that's what we're doing when we are imagining, is that we are allowing ourselves a flexible understanding of what's possible instead of a concrete understanding of what's already been manifest. So I travel the unmanifest via a tree. So do many, many, many peoples, many indigenous peoples from cultures around the world relate to the axis mundi, or the world tree. Usually villages and tribal villages would have a sacred tree that was said to be a physical manifestation or correspondence of the world tree and the world axis. I visualize it. I go through and I'll offer this as a meditation that you guys can try out at some point in time. I do intend to begin offering a meditation series, just because I find it incredibly helpful, beneficial, and useful. And it flexes your ability to create from the unmanifest, or to envision the realm of infinite possibility, which is such a vital piece of your journey in life. Is to be able to visualize things for yourself and then create them. But the world tree, I find myself, I breathe and I visualize my lungs, and I visualize my circulatory system. And I recognize that the patterns in our lungs and in our circulatory system are identical to the patterns in tree roots and tree branches. And so we are that echo of nature. We are simultaneously the fixed human that we are, and we are also the infinite possibility of all that is. And part of that includes that tree branching and those tree roots and that circulatory system and that breathing. So as I breathe, as I settle into myself, and as I settle into that world of the numinous, I find myself sitting with my back against a tree in a meadow. And what time of day it is, what time of year it is, what the temperature is like, what the weather is like, differs based on what I'm going through in my life. And that doesn't need to be the same, but eventually I find myself merging with that tree and becoming that tree. And then I can find myself traveling to different places through the tree and its branches, as though it was a super highway system. And that's very similar to how the Norse envision the world tree, and the different realms that exist upon it. That's where Svartalfheim and Asgard and Helheim and all of the Heims are said to be realms that you can approach through traveling through the branches of the world tree. And it was through doing that practice that I ended up finding the beliefs that correspond with it. So I have a spirit first perspective on what I teach and what I offer, in that I discovered it first within myself and then found the literature that corresponded with my experience of the numinous in the external world. Most people do that in the reverse order. They try to search in the real world and try things out. And it's a bit like throwing darts at the wall. Eventually one might stick and it might feel great, but you can also do it from the reverse, and you can get your own experience and then go and find what in the world corresponds with that. And that's been the path that I have taken. I generally prefer to experience first through my own traveling, and then find what matches. And so using the tree is a powerful way of doing that. You can picture it lots of ways. So if becoming the tree doesn't work for you, you can also imagine that there's a door in the tree, and you can be like your cottagecore fantasy and open that door and go up the stairs. Or you can imagine yourself becoming a squirrel and you can climb the tree, right? If you have shape shifting in your repertoire of what you can imagine as possible. So your experience is once again limited by your capacity to imagine. As you enter the world beyond, the closer that you are to the middle world, the closer that you are to manifest reality, the heavier, the denser, and the lower the vibration. The further you get from physical reality, the lighter, the more diffuse, the more disperse the energy. So whereas here, the distance between imagination and manifestation is very large, the further that you travel from here, the closer imagination and manifest happen. So when you are traveling the unmanifest, you have the ability to experience in your mind or in your consciousness, you have the ability to experience instant gratification. I have a theory that I think that we get so upset about not experiencing instant gratifications because our spirits remember what it is to have instant gratification, to go, I want to be a bird, or like, like I watch What We Do in the Shadows, hilarious, just bat, and you turn into bats, right? Like we remember doing that. And we know that in our spirit, that is a facet of spirit, that is possible to consciousness when we are not trapped in density, when we have not taken on a physical form. However, there is so much value in taking on that physical form. There's so much value because you have the ability to experience. You have senses. You can feel, you can taste, you can smell. Those are such rich sensory experiences. And the deeper that you can feel and the denser that you can go, the higher that you can feel and the more subtle that you can go. So there is incredible value in that. But all of that being said, to let you know that all of the things that are not manifest and are not perceivable in our manifest reality are in the unmanifest. So when we are approaching spirit and when we are approaching deity and when we are approaching that kind of understanding and that kind of relationship, what we are doing is we are entering the realm of the unmanifest. We are accepting that the unmanifest is not unreal. It is simply unmanifest. And so you can connect with things that are unmanifest from your experience of being manifest because you are both. You are both your body and your spirit. So you use your spirit and your spirit body and your subtle vehicles to connect with spirit and spirit bodies and subtle energies. So it's never anything that you need to be afraid of because it's never anything that you haven't been doing. You've always been doing that. That's always been a part of your reality. You have always been connecting with, whether it's your higher self, whether it's your inner child, all of that are different ways of expressing the subtle energy and subtle realities. And there are an infinite different ways of connecting with those. So, and there's power. So I like to think of Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared, and follow me on this journey. So energy is, matter contains the speed of light squared, huge number of energy. There's so much more energetic reality to our material reality than we could ever conceive of. And so when I encounter people who are really frightened of spirit, because there are frightening things in spirit, I think the thing that they fail to remember is that having taken on a physical form involves so much energy. You are so much more powerful than anything unmanifest. Just because you exist, just because you are manifest, you contain so much more spirit in your body than the spirit does, right? You are powerful. So you just have to say that you have no intention of having that experience, and you won't have that experience. That's all it takes. You can develop your own personal protections. There are so many things that are available to aid you and assist you. So if you've been holding yourself back from exploring any kind of unmanifest spiritual reality, or doing any astral traveling, or doing any visiting the Akashic records, past life regression, the infinitude of possibilities that you can explore in the unmanifest. If you've been holding yourself back out of fear because you are afraid that it might hurt you, you're misunderstanding your own power and the amount of spiritual resources that you inherently possess within your body. So be not afraid is the first thing that is heard from the angels, the many-eyed and winged beings that we see depicted in art, because it can be terrifying, but you are more terrifying. That's why I like to say I am the most terrifying spiritual entity in my house, and I believe that that is very true. I definitely would not I do not have fear that there is anything untoward going on in my house, because I've long since scared that out. That being said, the deities, so the gods and goddesses, when we are talking about gods and goddesses from a polytheistic point of view, typically what we are discussing is unmanifest spiritual entities. They are currents of energy that have taken on a certain form. They have a thought form, they have a construct, they have a spirit vessel or an energetic body, that though we cannot, they have not descended to physical reality, and we cannot interact with them in the physical world. We can ascend from physical reality and meet them on the planes where our spiritual bodies interact with their most dense forms. So in order to reach out to deities, you have to enter the unmanifest through your spiritual vessel in order to interact with those people. But that is not a special facet that is only granted to some people. It's a universal facet that we all possess and can learn to cultivate. And though you may not be able to see and interact with those spiritual entities in a clear fashion, like have a conversation in your day-to-day world, they do receive that information. So the day-to-day actions that you take in the manifest world can still interact with those spirits, can still show respect and show gratitude and show offering and show homage to those spirits. So no, there's no, there's no, yes, oh, Freya, she's standing right there, I can see her. It's a feeling of an understanding of her energy once you've met her, once you've interacted with her. How Freya might show up in the physical reality might be as a cat, often as a cat has been my perception, but we'll often see animal messengers of those type of energies in the physical realm. So a person who is pagan may believe many, many different things. There are so many different ways, but ultimately what we are doing is recognizing that there's a material reality and a spiritual reality, that there's physical and there's manifest and there's unmanifest. And so when we are working with deities and when we are working with spirits, we are working with the unmanifest. And so many pagans take an animist view of the world. I have an animist view of the world. Not everyone does. When I speak, I of the world, I have a fundamental belief that consciousness came before anything that we see, that consciousness is within anything that we see. And so if everything has consciousness, then there is a life force energy and an intelligence to everything. So I interact with my consciousness with the consciousness that exists in stones, and the consciousness that exists in trees, and the consciousness that exists in the wind and in my chair and in my home. I don't worship those things as though they are a deity, unless I believe that perhaps that visiting animal or that visiting spirit is a messenger from a deity's energy, though I do believe that that's possible personally, and I do interact with, and I feed feral cats in my neighborhood with the understanding that that is the way to honor and show relationship to Freya, to treat cats as though they could be an emissary of the goddess Freya. Though I do not see every cat as being strictly her. It's just a way to honor and show worship to that thought form, that unmanifest entity. And so there are many different deities. So animism would be the belief that everything is alive and everything is conscious. Animism is something that I believe in and is common to indigenous faiths around the world. I am also, there's polytheism, which is a belief in many gods. And there's hard polytheism and soft polytheism. And hard polytheism states that there are or were one specific entity and that they're distinct and that they are different. So though you might conflate and say that Odin and Jupiter and Zeus they have similar powers and some similar stories, and they're across different cultures, you would see Odin and Jupiter and Zeus, and you would not see them as being the same entity. Versus soft polytheism would say that Odin and Jupiter and Zeus are different faces of the same energy. So as they have presented themselves. So soft polytheism is the essence of shape shifting. And I'm going to come back to my weaving thought process, so if you're weaving, you would say that Odin is a tapestry and Jupiter is a tapestry and Zeus is a tapestry, and they are distinct tapestries that are hanging in different places and that you would work with differently. Soft polytheism would say that Odin and Jupiter and Zeus are one tapestry that has changed and been hung multiple times in different places. It's made of the same threads, it's made of the same material, it does the same thing, but has kind of morphed itself to appeal to different times and different cultures and different peoples. I am a soft polytheist, not a hard polytheist, although I do respect the value of approaching those entities as though they are different. There is a theory that says that ultimately all gods and goddesses from around the world, there are only like 44 different entities, and that all manifestations of the Godhead are just simply faces that are placed upon those fundamental energies. I'm inclined to think that that's more possible, but once again, I try not to restrict the unmanifest and infinite possibility into something finite. But you might see hard polytheism and soft polytheism. And once again, coming back to the blind men and the elephant, people will fight about it. And I just try to stay out of it, as it doesn't matter, because it's all in our imagination anyway. So why begin a real manifest conflict over something that none of us can say for certain? So I say that my belief is generally soft polytheist. I don't know that to be fact. That's just what works for me. I am also animist. I don't see those two things as being mutually exclusive. I also recognize so I think I see that once again as circles within circles. If I go further out, I can see how everything is all contained within one source, and that within that one source, there are a couple of forces. I believe that that source and those forces are woven in all of that. So I see the value in the soft polytheism, the hard polytheism, the animism, the reflection of all of that as source personally. And once again, I generally attempt to be the sighted man as much as I can and to hold on loosely to any limiting beliefs. That being said, what have I covered? I've covered animism, polytheism, soft polytheism. So monotheism would be one deity. And obviously, I think that most of the Western world comes from monotheism. I would think that that's a functional misunderstanding to call it monotheist. Because if you're believing in duotheism, if you have one good God and one evil Satan, well, they're both, if God can't do away with Satan, then Satan is equally powerful, and those are two aspects to the same Godhead, right? So God and Satan are not fundamentally different. One cannot exist without the other one. You cannot separate the world into good and evil and then say that it is only good, because it's not. It's good and evil. So there's nobody who puts more worship to Satan than someone who believes in monotheistic God, witches are often accused of believing in Satan, and that's a misunderstanding. There are some people who worship God and Satan who have chosen to give their worship to Satan. That has nothing to do with witches. That's not a facet of paganism in general. Now, many pagans do work with Pan or Kronos, or the green man, the wild god of the forest. And the imagery of the green man and the wild god of the forest was conflated with the imagery associated with Satan. And Baphomet is a pagan deity and a pagan face of the green man, the wild god of the forest. But they are not necessarily one and the same. And then let's see, what else do we cover? So Wicca is duotheist, the goddess and the god. So instead of saying that there is Athena and there is Hecate and there is Artemis, there is the goddess. She might be known as Selene, she might be known as Diana, but that is all the goddess. And the god, you might say that's Pan, that's Kronos, that's Lu, you might have many names for the god, but it is all the god. And so essentially that's a soft polytheistic view, that's a duotheistic view. Both of those things are kind of linked together. But functionally, if you are on the path of witchcraft, you don't, not every witch believes in having relationship with spirit and relationship with deity. And that's okay too. I think most people have good reasons for choosing not to believe in anything, and choosing to stick with what they can sense, and what can concretely change their reality and what they can do with their hands. I think it comes down to a way of like I said that in one of the earlier videos, and I think this is another example of that, is that sometimes that we as infants have to be swaddled to feel safe. There's a piece of our consciousness that prefers to the comfort of a snug container. And so bringing our consciousness back into ourselves and only what we can control and what we have power over is a comfort mechanism in cases where we have been abused and disempowered. So totally fine if what you need to do is return to yourself and what you have power over and what you can see, taste, touch, or smell, if that's what gives you a sense of safety and that's what restores your sovereignty and your power over yourself in your life, then it's perfectly fine, whether that be for, a period of time or a period of time that extends to the duration of your life. I like to think that eventually in our reincarnation cycle, we are able to develop a more positive relationship with the numinous, and that we might eventually grow into a point where we can feel safe as spiritual beings in a spiritual world and in a conscious and alive and engaged world, to restore our imagination and our vision and our dreaming ability, so that we can actually cultivate difference and change and progress in our world. But we're all at different stages in our journey, and it's totally okay. So I think I've touched on a lot of the different beliefs and different ways of relating with those. And so I guess what I want to leave you with is that you are powerful in yourself, and you are a spiritual being. You are also a material being, and you are also a manifest being. And it's important to keep those two in balance. So it's important to exercise and it's important to meditate, right? It's important to imagine and it's important to experience, right? It's important to be well and it's important to do good. Like, you cannot neglect one facet of experience. So if you delve too far into the spiritual for too long, you can become ungrounded and completely neglect your real life, in which case you're going to have issues. And vice versa. You can become so immersed in the physical reality that you end up losing your purpose and your meaning and your delight and your joy and your ability to create change. And when we lose that ability to create change, it's really the slow decline to an eventual death. Like we lose neuroplasticity, we decline, that whole, you can't teach an old dog new tricks mentality is unfortunate because realistically speaking, once we've lost the ability to learn new things, it's when we begin dying. So I hope that what you can do is feel inspired to explore your own connection to the unmanifest and witness, how does that look for you? What does that look like? What might a relationship with spirit look like for you? And then let me know if any of the many too much information things that I mentioned resonate with you, because I'm happy to provide sources for further learning and for further reading and for further research. And I would love to offer some guided meditations that will help to offer a framework for you to explore some of these realms of the newness. And just let me know if there are any particular realms you'd like to explore and you'd like to go to. And I can help you to find that well-trodden pathway to those destinations in a meditation so that you can feel more comfortable exploring them and know that you're not going in alone, if that would be helpful to you. And I think that is about it. Let's leave you with, I've got my runes here. So let's pull a couple of runes and we'll just leave you with a message for today. So we got Dagas, Fehu, and Ingus. And what I would say from that is that there is that abundance moves and comes in many form, and wisdom and enlightenment and rebirth that we are offered is a form of abundance that I think is rarely considered. So your life force energy is a resource that you have in abundance. And how are you spending it? How are you using it? Are you refilling your prana, your mana, your chi? Are you refilling your life force energy? Or are you depleting it in pursuit of material resources? Don't become so focused on money and what's materially manifest that you exhaust your own health and vitality. Remember also that rest is sacred for restoring that. Nutritious food is sacred for restoring your life force energy. Breath is sacred for restoring your life force energy. Take deep sips of clean, clear air and understand that you are not just nourishing your body, you are also nourishing your spirit. And that if you spend too much of that life force energy in pursuit of money, all of that money that you accumulate might just end up needing to be turned over to the doctors that help you to fix yourself when you are broken and exhausted from those efforts. So and it's never too late to create a safe container and boundaries around yourself that says, no, I'm exhausted and it's time for me to rest. No, I will not do that for you. No, I cannot today. I will not be there today. Especially in this holiday season. I think that's a powerful thing for me to leave you with is No is a powerful medicine. No is protective. Your vital energy is a resource of yours that you should guard and you should protect. And your time that you spend in spiritual practice, and that your time that you spend learning and informing yourself and growing and nourishing your mind and your body and your spirit, all of those things are a vital resource of yours that cannot be quantified and does need protecting and deserves protecting. So do what feels good to you and make sure that you are exercising that no and defending your boundaries, because there are things that are more valuable than money. There are things that are more valuable than gifts. There are things that are more valuable. There are relationships that are found family that are more valuable than the relationships that you have with your actual family. And you can choose to nourish those relationships, and you can exercise authority over and sovereignty over your life. And so just remember that here as we approach this holiday season, is to take care of yourself, to nourish yourself, to learn, to grow, to remember that not everything of value is as it seems, and not everything that others say is important or of value is what is most of value to you, and that you get to decide. And be blessed.